Right. Share. Mhm. Right. Okay, everybody see that okay? This one
Yes,
right?
sir.
All right, good deal. Um, all right, well, we're going to begin on another monotheistic religion now that we've looked at uh, modern Judaism and Islam, but a smaller group known as the Bahai. Have you heard of the Bahai faith before?
I feel like I have at some point, but not fully.
Yeah, it's not a big religion per se compared to Judaism to uh, Islam and Christianity, but it's certainly around and large enough to be noticed. But most in the U.S. are not, you know, aware of it very much. So, but it is a fairly large following and it came out of Islam, but it's quite different from Islam. So. But it's one worth knowing something about because you're bound to run into it eventually. So its emphasis is on the oneness of the human race. So we'll see that as we get into some of its teachings. It has some this nine-pointed star here over here, and let me get it up here. Yeah, this nine-pointed star. And the word Baha has the numerical equivalence of 9. So the number 9 is important in the Baha'i faith. And so this star is associated with that. Uh, Even though it's not part of the Baha'i faith per se, it's commonly used to designate the importance of the number 9. And we'll see number 9 is associated with perfection, like in the Bible, 7 is, and unity. And so we'll be seeing some of this as we go along. This thing up here is called the ringstone symbol, uh, and was designed by Abdul Baha himself, and is often you'll see it on people wear it on their around the chain on their neck or other ways, which indicates the Baha'i faith. This lower line is said to represent humanity and the world of creation. And then this upper line here is God. And the middle line represents special station of the manifestation of God and the world of revelation, which basically means this is the prophet that is associated with the Baha'i faith, who we'll talk about Baha'u'llah as we go along here. The vertical line is the primal will, or you might call it, in from a Christian perspective, Holy Spirit proceeding from God through the manifestation to humanity. So this is from God to humanity, but it has to go through this prophet here, and he is referred to as the manifestation. And the two stars, or what they call haikals, represent Baha'u'llah and Bab, who are the two main founders of the religion. And so that's what this is all about. The World Center of the Baha'i Faith is in Haifa, Israel, which people might find strange that a faith coming out of Islam is actually in Haifa, Israel, but it's this huge, wonderful temple area. And anywhere you go to where they have a temple built, they can be, they'll be a lot smaller than this one, a lot of them, but they're quite nice buildings. And they all have 9 sides, these going around it. Again, going back to that number. It emerged from Shiite Islam, followed Ali, Muhammad's son-in-law. Imams were not just political leaders, but spiritual leaders, which had nas, or what we would call inspiration, as Muhammad had. And we talked about this in difference between Shia and Sunni Islam. In Shia side, these imams are prophets with inspiration, and they speak for God, and not just like Christians. We talk about our preachers. They're much more than that. And same came with so this Bahai came from this side. If you remember the 12 imams, the 12th disappeared in the 9th century and is expected by the Shia to return as a kind of a messiah, or what they call the Mahdi. In the meantime, they've been waiting for what is called the Bab, which means gate or gateway, who will reopen the communication with the hidden imam. Now, if this sounds a little familiar, of course, for us who are Christians, we had John the Baptist who would prepare the way for the coming Messiah. And so this is something very similar to that. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some dependence of Islam on some of this, but a lot of in Islam, have lost this expectation these days, but that was not the case back in this time period. Sayyid Ali Muhammad in 1844, so you're now in the 19th century. He was an Iranian Shia Muslim. He declared himself to be the Bab, the gateway, in 1844. He would journey to Mecca and declared this to be the case in the Grand Mosque, which for a lot of Muslims, they weren't going to be very accepting of this. So they persecuted, he gets persecuted for making the statement because he claimed to have a revelation after Muhammad, and that's not acceptable for a lot of Muslims. He called himself the Bab-ud-Din, the gate of faith. And he did gain some followers. The disciples were called Babis, and they did not accept Sharia law in their belief system. Now, Sayyid Ali Muhammad, he's going to not only be the Bab, but he is going to proclaim himself the Mahdi. So he started out by predicting he came prepare the way for the one who was yet to come, but 1848 claims himself as the hidden imam, and this would bring in conflicts between the Babis and the government because of this proclamation. So now he is the Messiah figure they've been waiting for, at least by his own proclamation. And in the end, he's going to be executed in 1850. But before that, he already predicted who would be his successor. So as we move through their history, we'll move into some of the people that have influenced the growth of Bahai. He, as would happen with all these guys who take over the leadership, His name was Mirza Yahya. He took the name of Azel, Dawn of Eternity, and so his followers were called Azels. He didn't turn out to be too great of a leader, so his leadership would actually pass over to his half brother, and so his half brother, he will be one of the supreme movers in moving the Baha'i faith forward and precipitating a greater growth. Mirza Hassan Ali Nuri, he declared himself the leader, and he became known as Baha'u'llah. Now, Baha'u'llah means glory of God. He had never met the Bab personally, but he still the followers of the Babis also at this time became known as Baha'is, and this would continue to be a persecuted religion. He's imprisoned and eventually executed in 1892. He was thought of as so highly, they preserved his body for a couple of years, and eventually he would be buried in Haifa in Palestine, place where we saw earlier that center for the Baha'i faith. So this Hassan here, just a little bit about him. He was imprisoned in Tehran, Iran, in 1852, and he was released, but he went into exile to Baghdad. Ended up in Iraq, which is at that time was under Turkish control. In that time period, he had a 12-day mystical experience, and then he because of persecution, he kept moving from place to place. So in 1863, he was moved to Istanbul. He had 10 years in Baghdad, in which he revealed to his followers that this was the one Bab had predicted, the one whom God shall manifest. So that's when he takes the name Baha'u'llah, which you basically, he's saying that he is the actual Mahdi. And of course, this doesn't help the persecution situation. So he's forced to try to flee from one capital to another, or sometimes in the case of who's protecting him, they move him. He spent the remainder of his life in Acre, Turkish prison in Palestine, which is now in the state of Israel. But he was still able to send out missionaries and receive guests. So it was more like in prison, but yes, a kind of house arrest situation. What makes him particularly significant in the Baha'i faith is that he would write a number of books, and he was very influential. He wrote letters to heads of state, Pope, and he became very famous in his time period. One of the main works, The Seven Valleys, it's a mystical work dealing with 7 spiritual stages: the stage of search, love, knowledge, unity, contentment, wonderment, true poverty, and absolute nothingness. And some of these will come into play in the overall doctrines and teachings that modern Baha'i follow today. Another work, The Hidden Words, Teachings on Ethics. Baha'i are very strong with ethical teachings. The Book of Certitude, and this is the one that contains a lot of the main doctrines of the Baha'i. And then Kitab Aqdas, the Most Holy Book, contains a lot of the Baha'i laws. And so even though he would die in 1892, he, he led for a relatively short time, but his authority and stuff is gonna be what everything else is built on. So his interpretation of the Baha'i faith is actually going to be the foundational aspect of the Baha'i. After him, Abbas Effendi, his son, he becomes known as Abdul Baha, and that basically is servant of Baha. He would become the infallible interpreter of his father's writings. So that's why the writings of Baha'u'llah is so important in the Baha'i faith. And he carries on this tradition by interpreting that. And he would also do his own writing as well. He would also have to deal with persecution. He would be under arrest, but freed in 1908 from the Turks. And he would be able to travel widely and spread the Baha'i faith. And he became such a big representative of the Baha'i that in 1920, the British conferred on him the Order of the British Empire because of his work of peace. So by this time, you've had World War I and coming up to World War II, but you had the League of Nations, but the Baha'i were very strong on trying to find a unity of humanity, and the writings deal with that, and he becomes a big advocate for that until he dies in 1921. And with that, the grandson, Shoghi Effendi, he would take over and as what would be called the guardian of the faith. Most of the things have been written, but they still needed to be interpreted. And so Baha had made sure that this would be passed on to the grandson. And he would carry on the infallible interpretation of Baha'u'llah's writings. And he would be the main person that would guide the Baha'i through the World War II years. They had their beginning in Iran, but they were the spread, but Germany and Russia also persecuted people of the Baha'i faith during this time. And so he continued the writing for the religion, but he also was the one that began constructing these centers that are all over in different parts of the world, I should say. And he would be the one who would change the leadership of the Baha'i faith from an individual to an international Baha'i council. And by 1963, this would be the form of leadership that would bring the Baha'i faith into the 20th and 21st centuries. He would die in 1957. And so this would bring, basically bring us up to the time period of modern society. And so I'm going to stop it right here for the present, and then turn the recorder off here. All right.